Hello, guys. How are you doing? Today, I have the pleasure to have Richard Montora, who is a real estate agent who used to be in Ontario, but now he moved to New Brunswick. And he's going to tell us all about the market because um, the prices over there are a lot lower than Ontario, and it could be a very good opportunity. Either you are looking to move to New Brunswick or you are looking to maybe invest, it could be a very good opportunity. And Richard is going to tell us all about what's going on in the current market over there. How are you doing, Richard?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much, Carla. How about you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
The
How is
one thing I noticed is actually our weather is very similar. So I'm in Moncton, which is on the southern part of the province. So
okay?
we're really close to the ocean. So our temperature is very much moderated. So, you, I think, are having a nice warm day today. We will have a nice warm day tomorrow. So it's kind of
Oh, that's
24
nice.
hours
That's
later. But
nice.
yeah, our weather is very similar. So, it's interesting
That's very
because
important.
it
Yeah,
is.
that's very
Yeah.
important for you to mention because, a lot of people are scared to move because of the
Hmm.
weather. Like a
For
lot
sure.
of my clients ask me, like, I don't want to move to Calgary because Calgary is extremely cold.
Hmm.
So
Like
it's
our
nice to
weather
know
is
that New
pretty much,
Brunswick.
yeah. Well, it depends, like anything. Like if you're in Southern Ontario, if you're in the GTA, you have a certain weather pattern. But if you're in Parry Sound or Sudbury, it's a different thing altogether, right? And it's the same is
Oh,
true
yes,
here.
yes,
So,
yes.
Moncton is very similar in terms of weather to the GTA. And there are parts of the
Okay.
province towards the north which is a different world, right? Like they get a lot more snow, they get a lot more, everything. So, and it's interesting because when we first moved here, we drove through those areas. We drove through Quebec, and then we came in from the northern part of the province. And the first thing I saw on the side of the road was a big sign, and it had these flashing things on the side, and it said "Beware of moose." And it's like, oh my God, I've never, like, living in Ontario my entire life, I've never seen a moose, right? So obviously I'm paranoid, right? Like there's, I'm
Of
driving and
course,
I'm
of
looking for a
course.
moose everywhere, and it's like I don't see anything. So about 4 months after moving here, we were coming back to Ontario, and the GPS for some reason sent us down a different highway, right, as opposed to the main highway that we would have normally taken. And as we're driving, I see something off in the distance. It's a big black object, right? And I'm like, oh, it must be like a road closed sign or something like that. And as we get closer to it, it's a moose in the middle of the highway. And it's like,
Wow.
yeah. So it's like my first experience seeing it, and I like it's just very shocking. So yeah, you have to be careful,
Wow.
but
So
stick to the main highways. You're okay. There's lots of deer. There's lots of sort of wildlife, but it's an amazing
I'm
experience
pretty
here.
sure that is like super different than Ontario, but must be so beautiful as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, being in around Moncton, we're very close to a lot of natural resources. There's a lot of natural features. The Bay of Fundy is just around the corner. One of the lobster sort of areas in Canada is about a half-hour drive away. So, it's all kinds of neat things to explore. But, the biggest change I found from myself personally is I used to live in Scarborough, and then if I drove downtown or had to drive to the West End, you have to look at your GPS and you have to see how long it's going to be. You budget going from Scarborough to downtown to show a condo is maybe an hour on a good day, right? If you're going to Oakville, hour and a half to 2 hours, right? So the biggest traffic jam I've ever had here is 10 cars stopped at a traffic light. So it's like there's no difference. It's huge. It's a big difference, right? So yeah,
Wow, that's
it's
amazing.
yeah.
I honestly, I do everything to stop, like to skip traffic. I'd
Hmm.
rather seriously wake up super early and get
Yeah.
a stupid hour in the day than being
Hmm.
stuck in traffic. To be honest,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just
And I mean,
yeah,
living in
that's a
Toronto is
really
always
good
have to
thing.
plan, right? You always plan your traffic, you
Exactly.
plan your trip into the office or whatever based on how much traffic that you had. And here, we don't have that experience anymore. It's like non-existent.
That's
And
amazing.
and the other thing I noticed is driving from here into Quebec and then back into Ontario was the stress level while driving, right? Like here, you're on the highway and there's nobody, right? There's very few cars. You pass something, like there's literally very, very little traffic. You go into Quebec, the amount of traffic is significantly higher. So your stress level goes from a 0 to maybe a 6 or a 7. As soon as when you get into the province of Ontario, it goes to a 10. And when you get into the GTA, it goes up to like a 15, right? And it's funny because
Yeah.
if somebody asks me, how do I know that I'm back in Toronto? It's like I've been cut off 3 times in the last 10 minutes. So that's how it works,
It's how
unfortunately.
you measure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Welcome
I
home.
think it's I welcome home exactly. It's a nice I'm sure that after a few years or something you're gonna be like, okay, I can for a few days or so it's
Oh,
gonna
for
be
sure.
nice to have
Well, it's taken such a
that
long time
traffic.
to adjust, right? Like for me, when we
Yeah.
first moved here, we went to go to a restaurant, and it's like, okay, honey, it's like 8 o'clock. Let's go out to dinner. Go to the restaurant. They close at 8 o'clock. It's like, excuse
Wow,
me,
eight
they close at eight
o'clock.
o'clock.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
So like the keg is open a little bit longer, but a lot of the restaurants close early. All right. And it's very
Wow.
funny. So I wanted to go pick up a stereo
Yes.
receiver, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go Saturday afternoon when I have some time. So I go there. I get to the stereo store at 3:05, like 5 minutes after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They close at 3 o'clock. It's like, what?
A completely different
Yeah,
life. Okay,
yeah,
so
it
if you
is.
are
Yeah.
moving to New Brunswick, just
Hmm.
keep in mind that
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
crazy. That's crazy.
It is a different
Uh,
pace of life, right? For sure. And I think what we're finding is,
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah. So a lot of people, they're moving here or they're wanting to relocate, and a lot of it has to do with affordability of houses, right?
Okay.
So if you think about it, the average detached house in the GTA is probably in the neighborhood of about 1.4, $1.5 million, right? So
Yes.
here, yeah, the average detached house is around $300,000. So what a
Wow.
lot of people are doing is they're selling their property, they're taking their cash out of the property, and they're using that for retirement, or they're using that, to live on. So, and even if you think about it, as a young couple starting out, if you're able to work virtually, so you can work online as opposed to having to go into the office, do you want to buy a property in the GTA for $1 million, or do you want to buy something out here for three or $400,000, right? It
A
is
hundred
night and day
percent.
in terms of what you can get, right? So are you working to pay
Yes.
your mortgage, or are you working to live, right? So it's a different sort of lifestyle. Like here, we're working more so to live, right? You're trying to enjoy your life,
Yeah.
whereas in the GTA in Ontario, you're really working just to pay off your bills.
100%. 100%. Is a completely different um lifestyle. And
Exactly.
you know what, you're absolutely right. Like sometimes you have to really put into perspective, like do I want to have some extra money to enjoy right now, or do I want to
Hmm.
put everything towards the mortgage?
Right.
And it will be good, and next time that we do a live, for you to show us maybe like some of the houses, so like the viewers can see the amount of space that they can have
Hmm.
over there.
Yeah.
That will be very, very, very good to show them, if you can, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because I've done this with my past clients. So clients that I have back in Ontario, right? and I'm just showing them some of their properties that you can have. So they bought something for, 1.4 million dollars. Here it's about 400,000, right? And we were looking for something
Wow.
on the water before, and in the GTA for a beautiful property on the water, it was like 3 million. Here, it's
Yes.
anywhere
Yes.
between 7 and 900,000. So you can get,
Wow.
a lot more. And from that perspective, you can get a lot in terms of investment opportunities here as well, because a lot of
Wow.
housing out here are duplexes, right? So there's a number of different types of properties along those lines. So you could buy a duplex property, and they have what they call side by side, or a duplex on top, and another, like a kind of like a stacked townhouse, and that's a duplex.
Okay.
So what people are doing is they're also purchasing duplexes, in that they're buying a duplex for anywhere from around 350 to 400,000. They rent out half of the
No bad.
property, right? And that pays their expenses. They pays their hydro. It pays the rest of it, and then they live in the other half, right? So you have a
Yeah.
lot of properties along those lines, and if you can do that with something that's around $400,000, you can do really well, in that that is carrying a lot of your expenses, depending on the size of your mortgage. Or if you're retiring and selling, you can purchase something like that, or even you can do that from an investment standpoint, right? There's
It's what I was gonna ask you, because I have a lot of my clients that they want to jump as an investors, like they already
right.
own a home,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, like like we know that real estate is a way to increase your wealth,
Absolutely.
but here you cannot even buy a condo for 300,000. So
Right.
tell me a little bit about the that part. Like, is there condos over there that or is there mainly houses? I don't know
Hmm.
anything about New Brunswick. That's why I'm asking.
Oh, for sure. And it is really surprising, right? The mix of property, there's very few of condo apartments. I would say somewhere
Okay.
in excess of 95% of the properties are freehold properties. So either semis
Okay.
or row
Okay.
houses, but the bulk of them are detached properties, right? So there's very few
Okay.
condo
That's
apartments, but there's a lot more
okay.
purpose-built rental properties. So there's a lot of
Okay.
buildings that are, 8 stories high, that are basically purpose built. So they're just made, and they're typically purchased by and built by real estate investment trusts for that specific purpose, right? So there's a lot more in the way of rental. So what you notice is in Ontario, people are mostly purchasing a single condo apartment, and they're using that as their, second property. Whereas here, it would be a house as opposed to a condo, right? So there's advantages and disadvantages to that, in that a condo basically means there's no maintenance, right? So in
Yes.
Toronto, you have a condo apartment, the owner pays the maintenance fees, and then they don't have to worry about upkeep of the property, snow removal, any of that type of thing. Whereas here, the situation is mostly housing, right? Not apartments,
Housing.
right?
Yes.
So there is some, but it's
And
not really that advantageous.
okay. And for example, like, do you know any management company that, for example, like if one client would like to purchase a home as an investment,
Hmm.
are there uh, property managers that can take care of all these snow removal, the
Yeah.
leaves, and why not?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. There's
Okay.
lots of property management companies, and there's two main differences if you kind of take a look at it. One is your buy-in cost, right? Like if you think about it, a one-bedroom condo in Toronto is probably in excess of $700,000, right? Here, you're
Okay.
purchasing for 700,000 multiple units, so you can buy maybe
That's fancy.
a duplex where you have 2 units for around 350, 400,000. And then if you wanted to buy more of a bigger complex, you can get units that have more rental units in it. And depending upon the number of units, obviously it will go up from in price, right? So, but you can
Hear this
buy.
out, eh?
Yeah, it's
A
scary. It's
multi-unit,
yeah, for sure.
a
And it's
multi-unit.
interesting. Yeah. So and it's interesting. There's a lot of people that are like, once you get into the urban environments, I think that, you have sort of a fixed cap rate in terms of, investment. In Toronto, the main thing that people were using from an investment vehicle was capital growth. So that's to say that they buy a condo for 700,000. They hope to break even by rent, but most condo investments are usually losing somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 to $500 a month, and it's much worse now with the interest rates being what they are. So most investors that purchase a condo now are losing money. They're in the red, right? So here it's a little bit different in that you can buy a property for significantly less, right? So your entry level price point is lower and your rents are not as high, but you can actually be positive from an income standpoint as opposed to negative. So in Toronto, you're really looking for
Wow.
capital growth, whereas here you're looking for
Mm-hmm.
rental return. And over time, you will get that capital growth as well. So the idea in Toronto, I think, was more so you buy something, hang on to it for a year, flip it, and then you make your money. Whereas here, they're more longer term investments, right? So you will make
Okay.
your money, but it will take you more time in order to do that, right? So, and then the
And for
other,
example, sorry. And for example, what's the average rent in New
yeah,
Brunswick? I don't
well,
know if you have
again,
it.
you kind of look at major centers, right? So it's like saying,
Yeah.
what's the average rent in Toronto as opposed to, North Bay, right? It's a little different, right?
Yes.
So if you're looking in
Yes.
around, the Moncton area, typically for a 2-bedroom property, it's around $1,400 a month, right? So it is
Okay.
significantly
Okay.
less. So, a condo in Toronto, 2-bedroom, you're probably looking anywhere between 2,000 and 2,500, probably, right? So it is significantly
Okay.
more, but then it doesn't cost you twice as much to buy in here, right? So, from that perspective.
Exactly.
Now,
And
the
and
other
the cash
benefit,
flow is, it will be more positive than
right?
negative
Yeah,
in Ontario.
correct. You're right. And then the other thing that you're looking at, and one of the biggest challenges has been from an investment standpoint in Ontario, had been if your tenant falls behind on rent, right? How do I evict them? How long does it take for me to do that process? How long potentially am I going to be tied up in order to, get that tenant out? And I know that my clients in Ontario have experienced delays where they were taking 8 to 10 months to evict a tenant because they didn't want to leave and they had stopped paying their rent, right? So here, it's night and day difference is that you can evict a tenant who's for non-payment, if that's purely the situation, very quickly. You can typically do that in anywhere
Oh,
from 15 to 30 days. So he can be out the door.
wow.
Yeah. So, it
Wow.
is something,
That's
yeah,
a
you don't,
huge difference.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So your
that's a
risk
huge
is
difference.
significantly lower. Yeah, for
Because
sure.
imagine, like, if you're charging $2,000, I'm just putting an example,
Hmm.
and you cannot kick them out in 10 months,
Right.
you're talking about $20,000. Twenty
Right.
thousand dollars that probably you need to have in your savings account to be able
Hmm.
to pay the rent, right?
Right. Yeah.
In case they don't pay the
Well, yeah.
rent.
People are
And
using that income to pay their mortgage. They're using that income to pay their, maintenance fees, everything, along those lines. So, yeah. So if you're out that kind of money and then you potentially damage the unit as well, and a lot of these tenants, unfortunately, that are the bad tenants are not the ones that are going to have the money to make you whole down the road. So you lose 20, $30,000 on, for a rental loss that way, but that's money that you'll never see again.
and the headache.
Yeah,
Don't forget about the headache.
exactly, exactly.
that that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this. I think like is very very valuable information that you are giving our audience.
Hmm.
And I also like I have here some slides that I know that you wanted to share with our
Sure.
audience to see
Yeah.
how is the market. Let me
Hmm.
just put them here.
Okay. So the first one really, so Moncton is really comprised of a number of different areas. So Moncton is sort of the city, and then you have a little bit of a suburb, which is called Dieppe, and another one called Riverview. So those are the main sort of areas. It's kind of like Toronto, Scarborough, and North York, right, kind of thing. So each one has its own,
Okay.
sort of dynamic associated to that. So the main thing that you're looking at here is sales volume. Is we're a little, if you compare year over year, our sales volume, we're up 27% versus January of last year. So from that perspective, the market still remains very strong. And I know that if you compare that to the GTA, sales volumes are down quite significantly across the board. Now, the other thing, if you look at on the average detached house year over year, we're only down 6%. Where if you look
Oh,
at the
wow.
year over year losses that are in the GTA, you're probably looking at it around the 20%, depending upon the area, some worse, some better. Now, the big thing really is the number of active listings. We're up 300% versus last year at the same time. So they're up significantly, but because sales are up, inventory is up, our active, the months of inventory is really what we're looking at. Our months of inventory is up, almost 200%. So it's almost doubled, right, in terms of active inventory.
Wow.
Sorry, months of inventory. But if you look at it from a number, it's still very much a seller's market, right? So the way that months of
Okay.
inventory work is anything that is less than 4 is a seller's market. Between 4 and 6 is a balanced market. If it goes over 6, it's a buyer's market. So it's still very much a seller's market. And while prices have slid slightly, they're not down significantly when compared to other markets.
Okay. Okay. No, that's very, very useful because remember, everybody can say like, oh, the real estate in Canada is very healthy, but
Mm-hmm.
we have to break it down
For sure.
into the provinces, then the cities, and why not? And right now we are talking about New Brunswick in. Specifically Moncton,
Mm-hmm.
and well, the numbers are very, very different than the GTA. So
Well, look at the average
definitely,
price, right? That's crazy.
exactly, just by
Mm-hmm.
the average price.
Yeah.
So definitely is something for you guys to consider. Like if you already have a property here and you're looking to increase your real estate portfolio, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you think, in your humble opinion,
Mm-hmm.
that prices will continue to drop in this area? Do you think that the months of inventory might increase and will be now a buyer's market, or do you consider that right now will be a good time for you to invest?
So I don't think it's going to change significantly. And I think the main
Okay,
reason that it's not going to change is that a lot of people are kind of stuck, right? If you think about it, to build a new property, right? And this is the challenge for everybody. How much does it cost you per square foot in order to build a property? So, depending upon the builder and the quality of materials, we'll just use a number of around $300 a square foot. So if you want to build something, and say the average property here is around 1,500 square feet, you think about that, how much it's going to cost you to do that. So that just the build is going to cost you $450,000 plus the land and services. So if the average price is 300,000, you can't get a lot of people building a new property for less than what they can buy a property for. So from that
I
standpoint,
see.
it's not going to change a lot, right? So
I
people
see.
can't be in a position where they're selling their house and moving to something else, because most cases it's going to cost them more if they're going to be building, right? So
Okay.
it really kind of depends. So from that perspective, I think that we're going to be kind of stuck on inventory levels. And the big challenge is, because the cost of the housing is significantly lower, if someone's mortgage payment goes up by 4 or 5%, the average cost of the mortgage here is significantly smaller than it is in Ontario,
Of
right?
course.
If you have $1 million
100%.
mortgage and it goes up, 4%, that's huge, right? You can never make that up. But if you have a mortgage of $100,000 and it goes up 4%, sure, it's going to hurt, but it's not going to kill somebody, right? It's not going to
I
crush
see.
them necessarily financially to do that, right?
A
So,
hundred percent.
from that standpoint, I don't think that we're going to be in the same position. I think that, inventory may build slightly, but I don't think we're going to get into a situation where it's going to be a significant amount of inventory that is coming to market. There seems to be a lot more volume on sort of more the entry level price point. So in that, $300,000 price point. So anything below that. So there's a lot of properties that are kind of like in that 250 to 300,000, but those are ones that are turning over very quickly right now. It seems to be softer the higher the price point of the property. So once you get into the 600, 700, and it's kind of funny, we're not talking 2 million, but you're talking 600,000. That market is a lot softer than the $300,000 market.
So, will you say that there is a lot of competition there? Like, I mean, like, of course, the lower the price, the more competition
Mm-hmm.
there is going to be. But, like, I just want to picture how is the market
Sure.
there and how different it is.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a lot of bidding wars in Moncton?
No, not so much so. There is competition for some of the entry level properties. So you do in fact see that. So there is situations depending upon the property. And again, they're usually sub $300,000 properties. There is, as you sort of move out of Moncton and you move into a place called St. John, which is about 2 hours from Moncton. It's another city. It's a little bit smaller than Moncton is, but they're currently experiencing bidding wars. So they're back into that situation where they're having offer dates and they're doing that sort of thing. Now, it's a little bit interesting in that in a lot of cases, you can still win a bidding war with a conditional offer. In
Okay.
Ontario, it was never, a bidding war, you have to be firm. So, there it's more of a bidding war and it's still subject necessarily to maybe financing, right? Or a home
Yes.
inspection,
Yes.
right? So, there
Yes.
are still a little bit more, of that aspect of things. And then the other thing is that they do sort of a primary offer. So if they accept an offer, it's very common to have what they call a backup offer. So if that first
Okay.
offer doesn't go through, then they would move to the second place guy, right? So that one's kind of on standby. So if that first one takes a week or so to firm up, right? And if they're unable to during that week, if that person is going to be backing out of it, then they could move to the second place person and then get them to be in that position to take it up. So they have a primary offer and then necessarily they will accept or entertain a backup offer. So if the first offer failed, they move to number two option.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow, that's very, very, very
yeah,
different
it is. It is. Yeah.
from Ontario, specifically
Hmm.
the GTA,
Yeah.
is where I actually met Richard Ventura
Yeah.
here in the GTA, and well, like it's great to learn about other provinces, because definitely, people will like to grow their portfolio,
Hmm.
and I just wanted to put that in their mind that Ontario doesn't have to be the place. There is
Hmm.
other places, like you said. It will give you positive cash flow
Right.
versus being in Ontario, where you probably have to put from your own money.
Hmm.
On the other side, there is like you have to wait a little bit longer for the property to grow and in value, and why not? But
Hmm.
remember, guys, anything that you buy these days, you have to really think long term. If you want to flip or something like that, like Richard was saying, like right now, in order to build, in order to do something, it costs a lot more. So why not to think outside the box and look at a place like New Brunswick, Moncton.
Mhm.
Now, remember that Richard was telling us that you also can buy a multiplex. So that multiplex is a lot cheaper than in Ontario. We were talking about that is about 700,000. Obviously, once you are putting offers and why not, you have to do your analysis to make sure that you're paying a fair market price. But a multiplex in Ontario, or specifically in the GTA, it could mean now millions of dollars. I'm talking about like more than probably $3 million. So definitely is a good long-term investment, and is something that will give you a positive cash flow. So I'm going to continue with Richard's slides. And one more thing that I wanted to let you know, if you just join us, don't worry. You're going to be able to watch this again, and we're going to try to also get all the key points that we are discussing in order for you to get the most out of this live. Okay, so don't worry. Thank you so much for watching. Richard, please.
Yeah, no problem. So the next slide that we're talking about is just really the bottom part of the slide, which is sales, number of sales. You see that the market is very consistent, and this number goes back 10 years. So you see that
Oh,
there's
wow.
a range of sales, and it always seems to float within those numbers. And it is a little seasonal, like you kind of have the spring market, peaks, and then over the winter it tails off. So that consistency has always been here. So despite the fact that in some cases this one shows you the number of active listings, so we go back to 2015, where you had a huge number of active listings, but the number of sales were sort of based on the market. So it seems that no matter what happens, we don't have a large swing in terms of the number of sales, despite the fact that there's a lot of inventory. Historically there had been, and now as you see, the inventory for since 2017 has declined year over year over year. So we're at the first point of this year where we're kind of on the same level as we were in 2021. So it's kind of, we're moving back a couple of years in terms of those inventory levels. And usually what happens is, as you have a shortage of inventory, even we have consistent sales, so there's more competition for those houses, right? So that's when you see prices start to drive higher, when there's very little inventory that's available. And then I think the one thing that you have to understand is, we have a lot of immigration in Canada. I think that they've slotted upwards of 500,000 people that are allowed into the country every year. We have a large number of Ukrainian immigrants as well that are above that $500,000 person cap. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 390 or almost 400,000 Ukrainians that are coming into the country because of what's happening in their particular country. And then you also have a lot of students that are coming into the country, and then they get their once they get their diploma, to complete their 1 year here, they can apply to be a landed immigrant. And, if you take all of those things into account, you're looking at a sort of a net immigration of almost 1 million people over the last year, right? Those people are
Wow.
settling, in major urban centers. So they settled in Toronto, they settled in Moncton, right? So maybe not to the same extent. You probably get, half a
Of course,
million
of
there,
course.
and we get 50,000, but we're not even 50,000, because the population of Moncton is around 80,000, and if you put everything into it around the area, it's about 130 to 140,000 people. So if we even get 10 or 20,000 people coming here from immigration, it puts more stress on the environment here. There's more competition as well.
100%, 100%. Great information. Absolutely. Remember, not everybody's gonna stay in Toronto because let's face it, the amount of people that live already in here, and plus you add all these extra costs, and the minimum wage is not going very high. So definitely, and now that many people are working from home,
Mhm.
definitely are going to start to look at other places. And so definitely in general in Canada is a great way to invest. There's always going to be a need of a rent anywhere in Canada, and Moncton can be one of them. So I'm going to share the next one so Richard can explain us.
So this is kind of a little bit of a carry on from the last one, right? So this shows us the number of active listings. So that's in the gold color. So the number of active listings for the last 10 years, we kind of peaked in the 2015s, and then we've declined year over year, as we sort of move forward. So, we're at kind of the lowest levels that we've seen in the last 10-year period. As you see the two lines kind of cross, that's when you start to see price growth. So in blue, that's the average sale price. So you see for the longest period of time, prices were very consistent. Even if you remember from the last slide where we had a lot of inventory in 2015, it didn't really erode pricing significantly, just a small blip on it. But we've been consistent for a long period of time. But once we got into that
That's awesome.
shortage of properties, right, and you started to have more competition, that's when the prices started to, go up significantly. And I think, our numbers kind of mirror what's happened across the country. So we had sort of a spike,
Of course.
in February of last year. That's the same thing that we saw, in the GTA and other parts of Canada as well.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Is a very common move that we can see in the graph in
Hmm.
New Brunswick, Moncton, and we also saw in the GTA.
Right.
I'm just gonna share this one that it looks
Yep.
very interesting.
Yeah. So this is sort of the gold one in this case is rather than the average price, it's a median price. So the difference between
Okay.
average and median is like if you have a series of numbers, you would take all of the numbers together and divide it by the number of houses sold, and that's the average. Whereas the median takes off a high and a low and a high and a low until it gets to that middle number, right? So it's
Hmm.
designed more so to remove the inexpensive properties and the expensive properties and find sort of more of a fair price, right? Property, like a typical price that you would have. So it's a little bit different, but the chart looks the same so that we have consistency, for years and years and years. And then once we got into shortage of inventory, prices started to, increase significantly as well. So what the blue line is months of inventory. So months of inventory is if you have, for instance, 100 houses for sale and you sell 100 houses in that particular month, that's 1 month's worth of inventory. So again, anything below 4 is deemed a seller's market. Between 4 and 6 is a balanced market. And then once you go over 6, it becomes a seller's market, or sorry, a buyer's market. So we're still in the scenario where we are very much still on the seller's side of the market, right? So it just kind of shows you from that perspective, and again, I think this is pretty consistent across the country, that, our market is, has increased in terms of inventory, but still because of the shortage of inventory, sales have fallen, but inventory is also down. So the months of inventory still remaining quite low and very favorable from a seller's perspective.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Richard. I really appreciate you taking the time to explain us everything about Moncton, New Brunswick. And I hope next time you can show us a little bit more of the type of houses that
Sure.
people
Yeah.
can buy, and it could be good also to show like a multiplex. I think
Hmm.
that can be really good for somebody that would like to invest there.
Hmm.
I would like to show them a little bit more
Sure.
of Moncton for
Yes.
sure.
So next time, what we can do is I can show you a typical house and where that's valued and what you get for that dollar, and then maybe a duplex. So it's again more of a owner occupied on one side typically, and then you can rent out the other, or you could rent out the whole duplex, right? And
Yeah.
then we can get into multiplexes, 5 to 8 units, and then up if there's interest beyond that in around the areas as well.
Yes. You know what? I remember one day one investor told me, I was very young. I didn't even have money for one condo, but he always
Hmm.
said, like, whenever you buy, make sure that you buy a building. And
Hmm.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Well,
I'll
you
work.
bought part of a
I'll
building,
work.
right? So you bought a little part of the building, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
you buy a little
yeah.
part, but you know what, with the money that you buy one condo in Toronto, you can get a building in Moncton, so
Well, not quite, but
there you
you're
go.
getting there. You might get a floor.
Yeah, well, like
Yeah.
a small building, I
Yes.
a 5 unit, 8 unit building.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
yeah. Just to sort of
thank
give you
you
an
so
idea,
much, Richard.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
No worries. What I was going to say was, you can kind of get something that, is not on the high end of properties, but, usually in the under 500,000, you can get a 5 to 8 unit building, but it's not necessarily a great building. If you move up, so if you go into the 700 to $900,000 range, that's when you get into, a better quality building, that you
it
won't
will be
have to do
like the
that level of research.
luxury
I wouldn't go that
real
far, but
estate.
it's
No,
yeah,
okay,
it,
okay,
it is
okay. So
something that
I
is better
just
maintained,
asking.
and you don't have to, spend a lot of
Of
money
course.
to get into.
Yes. And remember, guys, the good thing is that the weather is very like in Toronto. So if you
Hmm.
move there, you can expect a very similar weather, which is one of the things that I think a lot of the people are scared to move because of the weather. And of course, immigrants like me, I come from Mexico. Coming from the sunshine.
Yeah.
It was a scary move to move to Toronto because of the weather. But
Hmm.
then you have Calgary and you have, like, even Winnipeg, that
Hmm.
is like much colder
Yeah.
than Toronto. And people that got used to the cold in Toronto, now they don't want to move from that cold from Toronto. So
Yeah, for sure.
Moncton can be the
Yeah.
place.
Yes, very much so. And then the other benefit is there's no traffic. So
Oh, yes,
yeah.
exactly. You can live a much relaxed type of life
Hmm.
in Moncton with no
Well, you
traffic.
don't have to spend like a quarter of your day commuting, right? So it's a different
Yes,
world.
you save in gas, you save
Yeah.
in
And your gray
in your
hair.
mortgage payment.
Yeah.
Yeah, your gray
And
hair.
car
Yeah,
insurance is
multiple
cheaper
things.
because there's fewer accidents here too. So
Look at
yeah.
that. You see, like, chin, 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 chin.
Exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So thank you so much, Richard. I really appreciate you taking your time. And
You're
I
welcome.
also want to thank Casta Latina, which is the broadcast that allowed me to do this live. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And I can't wait to have another live with you, Richard. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.
Have
Have a
a
great,
really,
great
really
night.
nice
All right. Bye bye.
night. Thank you. Bye.